Welcome to the Answer is Yes podcast, where we interview some of the most interesting people that have said yes to opportunities in their life. We hope that through these stories, you can learn to create your own destiny by saying yes along the way. Join us as we explore the new series covering topics such as passion, integrity, and hard work. I'm your host, Jim Riley, and I hope you enjoy these interviews as much as I do. I believe that everyone has an important message worth hearing. Today I get to interview Dr. Jane Goldner, the author of You Can Have Your All. And as a special tribute to the women in our lives on this Valentine's Day in 2020, I wanted to get somebody on the line and interview them and bring some value to your lives. And this one's for the women. Dr. Jane has done a wonderful job helping women in their careers as well as understanding their why and how they can integrate their dreams, their goals into not only a professional life, but their personal life. And she does a great job coaching not only clients, but major companies and the clients within those companies. So this interview's for the ladies out there, and men, you might be able to pick up a few things as well and add some value to your household. And for me, I'm just so appreciative of the ladies in my life and the work that Dr. Jane is doing to help empower women and discover who they are and what's important to them. So please enjoy this interview. Hello and welcome to The Answer is Yes. We appreciate you tuning in. Today I've got Dr. J on the line, or as better known, Dr. Jane Goldner. How are you this afternoon?
I'm doing great, thanks. Little cold, but I'm doing great.
Well, we're in the heat of winter, or the cool of winter, depending on where you're at. I'm in Montana. You're on the East Coast, and we're enjoying the brisk morning today. And I think, it kind of just makes you feel alive and ready to get after a work day or an interview or whatever you've got going on.
It's a wonderful, brisk day, which is different for me. They call it a hot Atlanta, but it's cold Atlanta this morning. And I'm usually in sunny Florida at about 75, 80 degrees. But yes, I love brisk. It gets me going.
Well, let's put you to the test and see if you can't put out a good interview in that brisk weather. I've been going through your website and your social media, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have you on the show today. It being Valentine's Day today, I think it's very appropriate that we highlight the females in our lives, not only in our lives, but around the country, and the successes and really what you're doing within the segment. So I'm thrilled to have you today.
Thank you for having me on such a special day.
Well, as the author of You Can Have Your All, and I love that tagline, and I want to dig into that, but it would be wonderful, as my guests tend to expect from me, that we talk about maybe where life started for you and when you started thinking about what you were going to do for career choices. So if you wouldn't mind, can you give us some of your background and feel free to go back as far as childhood or college or whatever makes the most sense to understand your background?
Well, first, to understand some of the transitions in my life, you have to know that I grew up on Long Island in New York and ended up first in Birmingham, Alabama, and then Atlanta, Georgia, until I finally migrated to Sarasota, Florida. So Each of those transitions helped me really focus on what was important in my life. I actually went to undergraduate school at the University of Maryland and went back home before I was going to go to grad school, but then met my husband, and we moved to Birmingham, Alabama, where he was from. So that was a big challenge for me because I always thought Miami was the South.
Yeah.
And and moving to Birmingham was a big transition. For me, I'd never been to the true South, but made some great friends and started actually my teaching career there. But I taught in an alternative school for kids with I'll quote unquote drug problems, and some kids were smoking marijuana in the bathroom, and some kids were mainlining heroin.
Uh-huh.
And what was a big learning for me was, it was before I had my own children, they taught me a lot about parenting. And it was a wonderful experience trying to help them get involved in other things besides drugs and find a healthier path. But I got into education because that's what my parents told me I should do. And eventually made my way into administration and education and realized that's not what I wanted to do. So when we moved to Atlanta, Georgia, I segued into corporate America, which was really an interesting time because at that point, corporate America really didn't value education credentials. Mm-hmm. And so, but that was the first time I said, yes, I can. If I could just talk corporate language and translate my resume into corporate speak, I could get a job, and I did. And that started me on my career in corporate America.
Can I ask you about the
sure.
I don't mean to stop you there, but I would love to hear a little bit more about your educating background, because clearly, as you said, you were helping kids, in quotes, with drug problems, and then you transitioned to a different level of the industry, and you were not enamored with it anymore. Did the transition from helping others into more of your second role within education change your mind about it because you weren't helping kids with problems, or how did that transition happen?
Well, and that was interesting because I was in administration in a school system where I was pioneering their career education program. Mm-hmm. And I was helping connect teachers and high school students with local industries to find out what it was really like to be in the work world. And it was really a very unique concept at the time. And I liked doing that, but I really missed the direct helping part. And I knew that I didn't want to become a superintendent or assistant superintendent. I wanted to have more direct impact, but I also liked working with the staff in education. Mm-hmm. So I began thinking about how could I have direct contact with adults in their career development. And that's when career development was becoming important in business and industry. And so I thought, well, that would be a natural for me to segue.
Yeah.
That's really how it happened. I still have a soft spot for helping kids. And when I was in Atlanta, I was the board chair of a nonprofit that helped middle school age girls with leadership and communication. So I never lost contact with that.
Can I just take a left turn real fast, because you've got a background in it, and I've really heard a lot about this recently. There is, in my opinion, a small, and maybe it's much larger than my opinion, but there is a small drug epidemic in some of these major cities with heroin. I've ran across so many colleagues and extension of colleagues where their kids are in rehab, are hooked on drugs right now, and it just blows me away. I mean, is there some indicators that parents should be looking for, or some key ways to identify that early on so they're not dealing with this into late teenage and young adult years?
I'm really not an expert in the field. I can tell you the things that I learned from the kids I worked with in that school. One was they had a lack of communication with their parents. Mm-hmm. So I would say to parents, keep the communication open regardless of whether you approve or disapprove of what your child is doing. Let them know they can always come to you. The second was inconsistent discipline, either because the parents were off traveling somewhere or they were, working so hard. Sometimes it was yes, sometimes it was no. And a specific example was this 15-year-old girl was told one weekend she could take the family car, and she did.
Yeah.
And then the next week, she took the family car, and she got punished for a month. So inconsistent discipline is another indicator that things aren't going well for the child. And lastly, it was boredom. They just didn't have enough to do in their lives, so they succumbed to peer pressure.
Yeah. And
those were the three issues I found, because eventually not only did I teach in that school, but I became the school counselor. Mm-hmm. And I found that those were the key issues. So, I think if you notice drastic changes in your child's behavior, whether it be dress or isolation or change of friends or grades going down, or you as a parent are not connecting with your child, those are some things to look for. And that's really non-expert opinion because I've been going from that arena for so long.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you even weighing in on it. I know it's probably been a few years, but it just seems like it's such a big ordeal right now. Thank you for that and the diversion. So back to your story as you moved into the corporate world after getting out of education. How did this story continue?
Okay, so I moved into corporate America, and what happened at that point, I was developing this career development program, and I was also had one son, working full time, and I was in my PhD program, and I was juggling so many balls. I realized I just can't keep doing this. And so I decided, okay, and I was pregnant with my second son. And I said, something's got to give. And so I started consulting and continuing. I was at the point where I was working on my dissertation. Mm-hmm. And so I was juggling all those roles, but I knew that I had to say yes to leaving a full-time corporate job if I was going to move forward with some sanity with all those roles I was juggling.
Yeah.
And so I then, through consulting, was consulting with a Fortune 50 company and was about to have my second child, about to finish my PhD, and they asked me to come internal. And so I did. And long about, I guess it was a couple of years after that, I was in my 30s, and my housekeeper quit, and I said, oh, don't worry, I can take care of that too. Mm-hmm. And so for a few weeks, everything went well. I was juggling all those roles, and one Monday morning, I woke up with chest pains. And I said, of course I have chest pains. Look at the stress I'm under. Look at all of that I'm doing. It'll go away.
Yeah.
Well, Tuesday didn't go away, and Wednesday, Thursday, and finally my husband said, you've got to go to the doctor. So I went to the doctor on Friday. He did an EKG, and he called me in his office, and he said, I'm so sorry to have to tell you this, but you've had a heart attack.
Oh, my gosh.
It was incredulous. It was just incredulous.
Wow.
And I said, but wait a minute. I work out every day. I do yoga. I eat right. How did I compromise my heart? So that was on a Friday. Went home, got in bed. That whole weekend I thought about, how did I do this? And I have to tell you, that was my biggest, yes, I have to change my life. Mm-hmm. I can't keep doing this.
Yeah.
And that's when I went through multiple lessons. And one was, I had two big role models. One was a childhood friend from the time I was 7, and we're still friends. And she was the penultimate mother. She was a room mother for both her boys. She was on the PTA. She's president of the PTA. She's president of the Board of Education. And her whole life was, centered around her family. And I thought, well, that's noble. I'm going to do that too. And then I had a colleague at this Fortune company, and she wanted to be the functional head, global head of her function. And I said, well, that's a noble goal. I'm going to do that too. Well, obviously that wasn't working very well. And so I realized that it's good to have role models, but you have to adapt them for your life, not try and be them. Mm-hmm. Because I was trying to be two people in one, and it was causing me ill health effects. And the other was that I had to stop being everything to everybody. It was my nature not to say no, and so I kept saying yes to everything, and I was everything to everybody, and that wasn't working very well.
That's a really
and so that's what.
That's a really common problem these days. My wife is the same. She says yes to everybody. She's so helpful and caring. And I think when we do that, we forget about ourselves oftentimes.
Well, and it's interesting you say that, because that's when I decided at some point in the future, I was going to write this book for women, because I knew I wasn't the only one. Mm-hmm. And so